Right. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Culture Eats Everything because it doesn't just eat strategy for breakfast. Culture is everything. And we love talking to leaders. We love talking about culture. We love just hearing stories that we can transfer to like, where are we at and how can we go apply some of these things? And I'm really excited to get the chance to introduce you to someone I recently met and just loved her passion and her vision and her journey as an entrepreneur. And so on here is Dr. Nirmal Kaur, and just wanted you to say hi, tell us a little bit about you. What do people need to know you, besides that you like tea?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for having me today. I am a gastroenterologist by background and was the director of the Henry Ford Inflammatory Bowel Disease Center for the first chapter of my career. Had a pretty conventional education, upbringing in a lot of ways, and I come from a long line of business owners and individuals in my family who have technical backgrounds but pivoted to business ownership at some point in their careers. So I'll never forget when I finished my training many years ago at University of Michigan and took a job at Henry Ford. I seemed like a great place, and I've had a glorious first chapter of my career there. I'll never forget my father was like, "So you're just gonna go work for other people? Like what are you doing? Like why would you do that? Our family were business owners." I'm like, "Dad, I'm a GI specialist, it's I want to be academic." And it made a lot of sense for me at that time. But I've always had this influence of business ownership, business growth, business minded in my upbringing, in my whole life. And so even as I was the director of the Inflammatory Bowel Disease Center for those years, I was always focused with my leaders on growing the practice, growing our reputation, growing the catchment area, making sure the rest of the state knew who we were. And it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun. I think we did a lot of good work in terms of bringing state-of-the-art novel therapies to patients with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis for that decade or so. And then just like any professional, after a few years, or I guess in my case it was a decade in that practice, I sought to spread my wings and took on the role of executive leadership for community partnerships for the entire institution, particularly for specialty services. So when we think about that, you think about how there might be a patient who needs a urologic surgery that a community doctor could perform, and that's great. They get their care in the community. But if there's a patient who has a very complex case and needs that surgery done perhaps by a specialist who only operates on that section or that niche care, then that patient's often referred to a large health system like the University of Michigan or Henry Ford Health. And I took on the leadership role for that work, ensuring that those relationships were sound for the I'll say second chapter of my work at Ford. And
Hmm.
then honestly, it just was this undercurrent bugging me over those years where I saw that patients would often tell me things like, "I can only come see you once, Dr. Kaur. My home doctor, patients live a few hours away, they gave me the gas money to get here. So I'm hoping you just give me the cure. And then I'll just go back because I took a day off of work. I've missed wages today to get here. I didn't have the gas money. My home doctor gave it to me, and I can't get here. And that makes it too hard. So I got to live my life. So that's all I can do." And so I saw this disconnect where a patient's access to healthcare really affected their ability to live well. And it just started really bugging me. I started to notice that we took really great care of patients who came a distance away if they could afford it.
Hmm.
We took great care of those individuals who could afford the time, the gas money, whatever it was, the inconvenience of healthcare. It's not convenient to come and see your doctor every couple months or sometimes even every few weeks for, particularly for individuals who have chronic disease needs. It's one thing to have to take a week or two off because you need a procedure done. It's another thing to have to come follow up with that physician every month or two because you have a chronic illness. And what I noticed is that patients who lived far away, that access barrier led to increased disability, led to individuals who just didn't show up at work as much, maybe lost their jobs. And it just really started to bug me that, man, I do the best I can every day, but if patients can't get to us, I guess we just fall short. So then, thank heavens for the, a lot of people call it a COVID silver lining of telehealth. That took care of that solved a part of the issue, but it didn't fully fix the issue because we have data today nationally to show that in large metropolitan areas, only about 70 to 75% of households have access to computers with video. That's a luxury that 25% plus don't have. When you take those data and look at rural communities, it's actually 65 to 70% of those households have computers with video capability or smartphone capability, basically the ability to conduct a telehealth visit from one's home.
Yeah.
So about a third of patients in rural America don't have that access. And one of the things that our company does is connects patients to bridge that access gap. So I skimmed over part of it. I decided to make that my work to improve access for patients by launching an independent consulting firm, because I saw that the telehealth expansion that I was able to lead at Henry Ford did improve access for patients. We had beautiful outcomes showing that we reduced hospitalizations, we reduced emergency department visits.
Wow.
We kept patients in the workforce because of this extension of the health system to bring care out into communities to make it easier for patients.
Sure.
And ultimately, the key to life there was connecting the local physicians with the specialists who take care of them. That physician to physician connection, that interconnectedness, I think can make or break patients' care. You call any health system, 1-800, whatever, to get in, probably going to have a pretty long wait. And we know that those trends are on track to worsen with physician shortages, nursing shortages all over the healthcare workforce. And we also know that when I get a text, what most of us docs, if I get a text from a referring physician, Dr. Kaur, can you just get this guy in? Like, I don't want him hospitalized. Could you just do us a favor? Of course I'm gonna help out. This is my colleague. It's my physician colleague who's hundreds of miles away shooting me an SOS. You know what? We can come into clinic at 7:30 instead of 8 o'clock. We can make it work. I will 100% of the time accommodate that request. And I know my colleagues will too. We have a code between us as physicians. I got your back, you got mine. We've all been through those years of medical school and training and fellowship for oftentimes a decade. And we have a code. So when you connect physicians, patients do better. And executing those connections, I have been very, very fortunate to have a good amount of success there. It brings me profound joy, and I've decided to make that my work. So that's why I launched Syncoro Health. We're an independent we're an independent contractor that comes into health systems, hospitals, and helps orchestrate those connections in their local communities for the sake of improving patient access, improving physician retention, because we can improve the way patients are shuttled to various care teams, and orchestrating all of those nuances. That's what my company does. So hopefully that's
no, it's awesome. You've given
really answers your question.
Well, and it's great to think of it in these chapters. Like you had the becoming a doctor and practicing, and then this leadership executive business side of life. And now you're still a practicing physician and now an entrepreneur with an organization and growing employees, and like a whole other adventure for you to learn. Back up though, like all the way to going to picking college and deciding to pursue this medical career. Why is that? What is it that drove you to do all that school and work and study?
Well, I'm a nerd at heart, Kevin. I'm a biochemistry major uh, nerd, and I like techie things. But like I mentioned earlier, there's always this influence of business over here. I just didn't know how to get started in business.
Mm-hmm.
And my father is a chemical engineer. A number of my family members have very technical backgrounds who practice in that technical world for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and then pivoted to business ownership and entrepreneurship. So I honestly didn't know at the time that, I mean, I'm 18 years old, I'm just going to get started in this technical world that seemed like a good thing to do. Um, I'm not sure anyone really totally knows what they're picking, when you pick an undergraduate major and things like that.
For sure.
And went along in that field for a bit, but there was always a thought quietly somewhere. Like I remember reading when I was in medical school, the baby boomers will be aging. And I remember thinking I should become a geriatrician because
Mm.
that would be a very large market where there will be huge need. Like there was always this little thought um, of eventually doing something different. Um, and then throughout my training, I going through the 100 hours a week. This is before there were laws on restrictions of how much trainees should be working. Those were challenging years, and all I knew is that I wanted to be the very best. And I wanted to not only specialize in a very challenging field of gastroenterology, but I knew I wanted to be what's called a super specialist. So
Mm.
I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to get a GI fellowship at the University of Michigan, and then I'm going to also develop a niche beyond that,
Mm.
which I was fortunate enough to be able to achieve as a Crohn's and colitis specialist. But then I knew that I would be doing something just in the realm of growing the practice and growing the business because it's just kind of was in my DNA.
Mhm.
And was fortunate enough to work with leadership at Henry Ford that supported that very nicely, and was able to give me the resources to grow that practice and piggyback on some of the growth that had already gone on at the institution, um, and piggyback onto those relationships. And ultimately, it was a glorious, 12-ish years, even
Yeah.
involving academia, because I do have this academic nerd background where um, clinical trials for novel therapeutics, we're talking about basically immunologic agents, which molecule is responsible for a person's Crohn's,
Mm.
which molecule is responsible for ulcerative colitis. Let's block that specifically. And I was able to serve as principal investigator on a number of clinical trials for those 12 years. And it was an excellent experience that, once again, is very nice if for a patient who can get there and show up for that work, but a lot harder if you're in a rural community and can't get in easily. So I
Yeah.
saw those discrepancies all over the place.
Mm.
Um, and ultimately, as I rounded 40, 42, kids were getting bigger, kind of in that wave of life where it was, huh, okay, I've done some good things, and I was super busy, raising a couple kiddos, and my husband's a busy physician as well. But as the kids kind of rounded 8-ish, 10-ish, I kind of saw, okay, I can kind of get my head a little bit above water.
Mm.
What are we doing here? Am I really doing everything I can to to be the as impactful as I can be? Am I really executing that? And I started to realize that I could do more.
Hmm.
And that was the beginning of my poor husband has to put up with this. My goodness. I mean, bless his heart. Bless his heart. That was the beginning of the I think I'm going to do something very different. My husband's like, "Oh geez. What's going on? What's happening now? Why can't you just be a doctor? You have a great job, you have a great life. Like why can't you just be a normal person?" And I'm like, I have this there's something that I know I can do something a little different.
Hmm.
And it's funny the way the universe hands you these little hints and snippets. So
Yeah.
I'll share this with you. I'm one of my nurses many years ago clearly had dropped 40, 50 pounds. I'm like, you look amazing. Like, what did you do? How do you, good for you. We're happy for you. She's like, I'm sleeping better. Life is better. I got connected with this sleep specialist and she's changed my life. I'm like,
Wow.
awesome. A few months pass. I happen to be in the stairwell walking to my office and I realize I'm behind that sleep specialist. Like, are you Dr. Such and such? She's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, you should know you've really helped my nurse. We don't always hear about the successes we've had as doctors. We often just kind of run of the mill.
Mhm.
And you should know you've changed her life and she's doing great and she cites you for that credit. And this doctor's like, oh, okay, like thanks, lady. Aren't you that Crohn's doctor? I'm like, I am. Okay, good to meet. I've heard of you. I'm like, okay, whatever. Nice to meet you, doc. We walk out. That's it. That's all the interaction is. 6, 8 months go by, something like that. That doctor pings me on social media. I heard you're doing something really cool. Let's talk. Okay. Now we're in the COVID era. So we do a Zoom and she tells me what she's up to. Super cool stuff. I'm going to tell her what I'm up to. She's like, will you just do me a favor for yourself? I'm like, I barely know you, but I feel like we have a connection. Let's talk. Will you just buy yourself this executive coach? Just try it out.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay. I knew I wanted to do something somewhat interesting. I didn't know exactly how. But I'd been telling my husband for a bit, like, I feel like I feel like I have a business. I just don't know how to get this started. I don't know what to do this. I'm a doctor. I don't have an MBA. I don't have those things. So I meet this coach, and he is a retired executive from a health system. Uh, he's in his 70s. He has profound business experience. He launches startups, and he's just a good guy. And we just hit it off. And I tell him what I'm about. I tell him what I'm looking to do. And a couple weeks go by, and he texts me, I can't stop thinking about what what you could potentially do here. Like, let's talk. So we started talking regularly. We realized, and it had to come from him because I'm still don't quite have the perspective, right? I'm in my early 40s. I've worked at a singular institution. I don't quite have this eagle eye view, but a 70-year-old retired executive of multiple health systems does. And so we start chatting, and he's just like, you're sitting on a gold mine, lady. You can be so impactful for healthcare. I think you just don't quite realize the impact you could have. And it was kind of just uncanny the way
Hmm.
it went that, um, I mean, my nurse praised the doctor. I ran into her in the stairwell.
Mhm.
I'm connected to this individual. And now uh, he's actually the COO of the company that I've launched, and
That's
we've
awesome.
amassed a team
Mhm.
that comes into health systems and hospitals and helps out and improves access for patients and
Mhm.
improves programs
Mhm.
and improves, I think, healthcare delivery
Yeah.
today. So I, it's fascinating how the universe helps you out when you're trying to do the right thing. I'm just
Well, and so
marveling at
say
that
more
thing.
about that, because it's the doing the right thing. You mentioned, all the academic and the school, the logical, the business stuff, but there's a heart component. In fact, you even kind of pointed to your heart. That's a deeper, maybe higher purpose behind all of this. I heard it in the story of the person who drove hours and had to get the gas money from the doctor to come see you. But why does this matter at the end of the day? Because it's not really about business. It's not. What is that for you?
No, I think what it is it's about impact. If I see that the little slice of of whatever actions I've taken in, it could be 15 different ways, can improve an individual's health,
Hmm.
how can I not at this phase in my life where I can scale it up? How can I not scale this work to the highest level possible to be as impactful as I possibly could be?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can piece that together, and with the help of the way the universe keeps giving me these nudges and keeps giving me these little uh, kind of sparks
Mm-hmm.
that make it so easy.
Hmm.
That is, I can't not follow that.
Hmm.
I think there has to be um, a respect for that spark, for that feeling when I'm so fortunate to be in situations where patients are, profoundly grateful for whatever actions we've taken. And I don't mean on the medical side as a practicing physician. I'm talking about the steps we took to improve virtual care access. And I get to be the lucky one on the other end of that screen, seeing the tears of joy from the individuals like, Doc, we couldn't drive, but we can see you up here from, you're much closer to our house now. We led that team that set that up. But shifting gears from technical, academic, medical, science, shifting to maybe I should quiet down the noise and just listen to that spark.
Hmm.
That was that is a massive shift for me.
Hmm.
That has been a gradual one, I'll say, because it would kind of come up here and there, and I was like, doesn't make scientific sense. Moving on, and
Yeah.
I'd kind of ignore it for here and there.
Sure.
There are definitely waves of my life when I've just ignored that sound, that voice, or whatever we want to call it.
Hmm.
But when I've started to listen to it more and heed that more, that is, and really, I guess what we're talking a bit about faith,
Yeah.
having faith that spark has some type of higher calling.
Hmm.
Um, I've found that is going very well. And it's so ultimately, I think, to answer your question, um, it's about impact and helping as many people as I possibly can with whatever days I have left on this earth.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. And it's interesting, especially when you think about it through faith. It just, there's something deeper, something bigger than necessarily what you can logic or even rationalize. And learning to pay attention to that is definitely hard. Whether you see it as faith or whatever people talk about, but it's learning to slow down and pay attention to those things and see where they lead. And back to what you said at the beginning, like how you didn't exactly know you'd be doing this when you headed off to college. And so helping younger people, like just study things that you find interesting and get good at some stuff, and you'll figure it out. You'll evolve if you keep persevering, because you said it's almost like been easy, but then there's been plenty of hard work and 100-hour work weeks and all those things that have also contributed and led you. Um, and there's kind of these chance or maybe even divine interactions, but then there's also these sage, having a mentor and other people, coaches outside of you to help you see something that you weren't seeing in yourself, um, and the possibility, which is, yeah, it's just cool to highlight. Like, I think for all of us, we always need that outside person. Like, I think about the Olympics coming up, that these athletes are the best in the world, and yet they still have a coach. They still have someone outside of themselves who can see things that they can't quite, to help them be conscious of it or focus on it or whatever's needed. And I just think that's true for all of us. No matter how expert we are, in certain areas and fields, we need that outside perspective to help us pay attention to the sparks, even, acknowledge them, validate them. What
Totally.
There's a ton of things that are just fascinating about the story for you, from physician to executive, from, like, medicine to business leader, and still doing those things. What are some of the things you've learned about yourself through these chapters of your journey and career?
You know, I've it's funny when you look back, I've realized that my persistence, my tenacity, my hard-headedness had that version of me in my maybe teens, 20s, and 30s. Maybe like a big chunk.
Yeah.
She had those were great qualities, and they served me well. And how do you wake up from a dead sleep to go take care of an emergency? I mean, you've got to want to be a good doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So those were great qualities, and I've learned that I have to kind of put those things in a column and reserve them for when they're needed,
Hmm.
but also quiet that quiet that noise that comes with that. Like, I've got to be doing, because with the persistent, tenacious Dr. Kaur, like, she's a nut. She's got to do A, B, C, and D. She's got to go. She's got to stay up to date on this. She's got a list of 22 things to do, but that has to be compartmentalized,
Hmm.
and I call it a beta line of thinking, and separated from the higher mind wisdom, which is a different version of oneself. That I don't know that that version of me was really around until the last 5 years or so. I mean, it's a maturity thing.
Sure.
Um, and maybe when that version, that higher mind wisdom tried to come through here and there in my 20s or 30s, she was squashed down by the nut of the nut that was in charge in those years. But putting that aside and making time for myself, where I just allow that higher mind to be in control, that has led to such a lovely marriage of those two. So
Yeah.
I for a little wave in there, I'm not proud of this wave, but for a little wave in there, I was like, gosh, I was such a nut. Like, I'm so close-minded about so many things.
Hmm.
And this personal evolution to being much more kind of mature and wise, I think, as I hopefully I'm a bit more now. I shouldn't We shouldn't poo-poo that other version, because that version had great accomplishments, did a lot of good, and we learned a lot from that. But merging those two together, um, I've never been happier.
Yeah. There's a
I've
new
learned to
power.
merge those two together.
Yeah. And fulfillment. And as you said, impact. And that's exciting. One more question before I ask you the final question about the book recommendation we always do. But one of the things I mean, you said it earlier, it was like the key to life in this idea and evolution was the physician connection piece, helping physicians collaborate and connect. Say more about that, because I'm sure that translates to other industries and applications. But why is that so magical?
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. Um it's all too common, Kevin, where the technical experts in many fields kind of are put into this bucket of, you know what, they're the tech people. Just let them just keep executing the tech. And there's all these administrative business people who are executing the business side. But if they're not, if the tech background is not in the business folks, then it's how is that the business of that technical field going to advance? So I been fortunate enough to be in the position of a physician leader where I have the medical expertise to help the business side, and kind of thought that was the norm because I was fortunate enough to be in that position. But as I worked with my executive coach and saw how rare that was, I've learned that physician leadership has got to be involved in the business decision. One example, we were many years ago, just got this note. We generally take 30 minutes to see a patient. We just got a note. Some business person said, we're going to see every patient in 15 minutes from now on. And it was one of those, what? Like, do you understand? We're telling patients they have to go to surgery. We have to walk through the logistics. Like, this is a big deal. And I just have to pick up the phone and say, we are not seeing patients in 15 minutes. Like, I don't know who made this call. We are seeing 30 minutes per patient, no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, when there's a disconnect between the tech and the business, it's not gonna, like, it's gotta be the whoever is executing that technical work, physician, technical person, whatever industry, got to be involved in the business side, or the business decisions are not going to work. So, so I think it's very important that those are combined.
And it's that simple and yet, I guess, complex, and like slowing down enough to figure out what that exactly means, not just in the healthcare system, anywhere, to figure that out. Because it's funny in our work, working with lots of organizations everywhere. One of the things that comes up so often, besides like burnout and communication lacking, those are two pretty typical culprits in people's perceived cultural problems in the organization. But there's always an us and them. It's they don't get it anymore because they're so removed from the day-to-day, the front line, that work. And so that makes a lot of sense, and figuring it out. So I have like 1,000 other questions for you, but I'm only going to ask you one more just for the sake of time. Give us like a book that you would recommend that, whether it relates to your story or not, it's just something that's had an impact on you and you'd recommend other people should read it. What is it?
I love it. So I went through the usuals. I'm sure, a lot of people cite good to great, lean in, all the usuals, but I've got to tell you, one of the, I think the most exciting things about my journey into entrepreneurship is how simple some of it is. How it's actually very simple and just requires oomph and confidence and really just belief in what I'm calling this higher wisdom. So there's a book, I got it from the public library, and it's called American Entrepreneur, and it is by, oh my gosh, William, I'm blanking on his last name, but he's the creator of Duck Dynasty. And the book is written, I think you're gonna love this, Kevin. It's written probably at the 10th grade level. And I just love this thing because it talks, I mean, it's a nice 10th grade level synopsis of John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and John Astoria, several of our founding fathers and entrepreneurs, and just how they persevered and the things they put up with. And it just makes, I'm very inspired reading it because I just think, they put up with what? Like, oh my gosh, some of it's such hardship that they went through. It's like, and I'm worried about that. Like, it just helped put it in perspective. So it's called American Entrepreneur. And my son's 10, and I told he has to read part of it too. Poor little guy, he's being forced to. I'm like, buddy, you can handle this too. Read me this page. You just so he has an idea then.
Well, but it connects with so much other work. I'm thinking of Carol Dweck's book Mindset, on whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And I was talking with just another buddy today, just about as being fathers. I mean, all of us have our own ways of being fixed and having growth mindsets back and forth. But realizing as parents, we often celebrate the accomplishment or the talent of our kids instead of the effort and the perseverance, which is the thing that will make the biggest difference in their life, is believe in something and persevere and stick with it.
Yep.
And one of my favorite movies, and this is a funny one to mention, if you haven't seen it, don't watch this with your kids until you decide. But the movie Whiplash is about like a really, really, I'm not a musician, so I don't understand it, but it's about this really hard to get into musician school, and then like the best of the performance jazz groups. It's got an insane amount of profanity and offensiveness, but it boils down that this guy's passion to become a world-class best jazz drummer was just whether or not you quit or not. And that's so obvious that the best people got there because they didn't quit. You're like, well, duh.
That's
But
it.
being willing to translate it to yourself and choose to like believe that you can get there and have the oomph, like just that word, just don't quit.
Yeah.
It is that
Yeah.
simple, but the emotional side of it is terrifying day to day
Yeah.
when we think we're failures, we don't know enough. All right, I love it. Mary, that is definitely not the book I thought you would recommend. So.
I thought you'd get a kick out of it. I'm sure it's not a common one. My husband was rolling his eyes like, oh my gosh, can't you
Duck
just
Dynasty.
say a normal answer? Like, no, I cannot. Duck Dynasties, American Entrepreneur.
And more importantly, that just really have been helpful. So that's what matters. Like that, and it can help others if you maybe
Completely
get past the title, because I don't know. I don't know if that would make any sense. I would be like, Duck Dynasty.
You might not pick it up,
I might, but
now
I
might.
will now. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Coral, for your time and for just following your passions and your nerdiness and listening to that spark. It's inspiring and encouraging, and look forward to seeing the work that you continue to do as a physician and at Syncoro. And just thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity.